Hello, this is Nick here from Gorgon Reviews. I'm talking with Dan and Sam Habib, the co-directors of The Ride Ahead.
Nice to meet you. I'm Dan Habib. I am the co-director and producer of The Ride Ahead, and I work part-time at the Westchester Institute for Human Development out of New York. We're here in New Hampshire today, and we got Samuel as well.
Hi, my name is Samuel Habib. My pronouns are he and him. I am the co-director of our new film, which is titled The Ride Ahead. I work part-time at the Westchester Institute for Human Development as a multimedia production assistant and presenter. I'm also a college student. Thanks for interviewing me.
This is a documentary about Sam. Sam wanted to find out what it truly means to be an adult and how to make yourself feel like an adult when you have so many things to worry about in your life. The documentary involves a lot of interviews with various people giving great advice, even about uncomfortable topics. So thank you so much for spending time for the interview today, gentlemen.
You got it.
Um,
Pleasure to be here.
for both of you, because this is a film festival and I like to talk about celebrating film, what's the first movie you remember seeing in theaters?
We had a funny discussion about that because I didn't know what Samuel was going to say. So I'll do mine first, and you can do yours, Samuel. I'm 58, so it's been a while since I was young enough to be going to movies. But my dad used to take me to the Pink Panther movies, the old Pink Panther movies with Inspector Clouseau, Peter Sellers, into the drive-in, and it was a really special father-son time. We'd go to the drive-in, get popcorn, watch all the Pink Panther movies. How about you, Samuel?
The first movie I remember seeing in a movie theater is Including Samuel, which is the movie my dad made about me when I was in elementary school.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that. I didn't know that was his first movie recollection, but that was our first documentary when Samuel was only 7 years old that came out.
Nice. Um, on the note of drive-ins, Whidbey Island does have a drive-in theater. It's actually like 10 minutes from my house, so it's really easy to go all the time. It's very convenient.
Cool.
Um, as you both introduced, you're both co-directors for the film, but this is not your first rodeo, like was just said. Sam, you directed My Disability Roadmap a few years ago. And what was the biggest difference for you in directing a short versus directing a feature-length documentary?
The biggest difference for me in making the feature after the short was with working with the animators. It was so cool to see their concepts and rough animations. And I think the final animations add a lot to the film. The feature also allowed us to include a lot more from my conversations with the 7 mentors, especially about big topics like sexuality and ableism.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
And
I'm just glad that Samuel, talked to the animation, and it's almost like Christmas or Hanukkah. We celebrate both. When you get an animation in your inbox from the animators, you're like, "Oh my God, that's amazing!" Like, there's this one great animation you may remember where Samuel's getting advice around sex and sexuality, and Keith Jones tells him to always bag it up, wear a condom, and we have an animation of a condom going down over Samuel's wheelchair, over his communication device. I mean, that's just gold. And we were able to do a lot more in the feature with animation, with the music score, as Samuel said, with the interviews, and also much more verite scenes of Samuel's life than we could do in the short.
mhm. And Dan, you've done shorts before, as mentioned, a long time ago and recently. Where did I go? You have a long history of that and in journalism. How was it taking on such a personal, large documentary to direct for you?
I mean, I loved it. I feel like this was the right time in my life, my career, to do this project, and to do it with Samuel, I can imagine was incredibly meaningful. To do it with my own son, to co-direct. I really, I think used all the experience I've gleaned in my 35 years of doing documentary work, both still and video, for this project. But the biggest thing that we kind of put front and center was this should be Samuel's story from his point of view. And every decision we made was, how do we maximize Samuel's ability to tell your own story, right? And and part of that was making sure we had a majority disabled crew. So we, from the very beginning, decided to hire a majority of our production and outreach crew be disabled people, so that the story of a disabled person's life could be as authentic as possible. So I think that was a real groundbreaking decision for us. Don't you think?
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
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 Um,
Mm.
S- Sam, you got to meet and talk with Ali Stoker, who I'm jealous that you got to do that, and so many other influential people.
Mm. 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 Mm.
Um, they had a lot of words and wisdom passed on from them that you don't have to share here now because someone needs to watch it. But um, did your conversations and friendships with them help improve your own outlook on adulthood?
Yep. Go ahead, Samuel. Pretty, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I said she's pretty. I always it's Stroker, actually, not Stoker, but it's close, Stroker. And yes, Samuel has definitely a celebrity crush on Allie, but she's a really great person, amazing. Do you want to talk a little bit more about your interviews, Samuel, and some of that?
The advice I got from Maysoon was, you are not alone. Find your community. That was powerful advice because I've always had a strong community, starting with Beaver Meadow Elementary School in Concord, New Hampshire. I'm continuing to find my community at NHTI Community College, in the disability justice community, at work at the Westchester Institute for Human Development, and in my hometown of Concord.
So yeah, you're asking about some of the advice he got, and that find your community that Maysoon said seemed to be a thread through almost everybody. You know, find where you feel like you can be your full authentic self. And Allie said the same thing.
Dan, you got to be a part of Obama's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities, which cool. Was there anything that happened during those years that really stood out to you? Was there policies and changes that were enacted or drafted during that time?
Yeah, there were a bunch of things I did. I was a part of for those 3 or 4 years. I mean, we focused a lot on accessible technology and the importance of technology, whether it's the internet, whether it's specialized devices like Samuel's communication device or wheelchair, to be accessible and affordable and covered by insurance. I mean, it's such to have access to technology now for people with disabilities opens up work, social life, transportation, everything. So that was a big initiative that we pushed, and some of our recommendations were implemented at the federal level. The other thing was we tried to highlight the shortage of the direct support professional workforce. And you see in the film, multiple people, Molly and Sophia and Emily Kirk, his direct support professionals, helping Samuel live that full, adult life. And there's an incredible shortage of people in the workforce because they don't get paid well. They don't often get health insurance. There's not enough respect for that job. So that was another big push we made through the committee, was to professionalize and incentivize more people to go into that profession.
I'm on the enterprise board for my company for the Ability Awareness Association. One of the bigger goals we have is to help break the stigma that people have for disabilities and creating childlike environments for adults and making sure that people who are caregivers also get support as well. In the documentary, Samuel, there were a few scenes where you were clearly being talked down to by random individuals, and even when called out, they didn't really change what they were doing. The big notable one was at the airport. Would you say this is something that gets more frustrating as you got older, or have you been able to learn to deal with it and try to ignore it?
I want to curse at people who talk down to me, like Joe, the woman at the airport, in the film. But I did not because I'm afraid that people would get mad at me. Next time, I will say, talk to me like I'm an adult. I am learning a lot from people with disabilities, that it's not easy to be an adult with a disability. But I'm learning from them how to be a better disability rights advocate for my life, and for other people with disabilities.
For Dan, what is one or more things that people should know about caregiving that would help caregivers out tremendously?
I think there's a person in our film named Bob Williams, who's an older gentleman who also uses a communication device, and he's a real leader in Washington on policy. And I got to interview Bob when we were starting to make, including Samuel, when Samuel was just 3 years old, about 21 years ago. And the advice he gave me, I would pass along to everybody, including caregivers, which is when you're a parent or a caregiver to a person with a disability, give them choices at every juncture. Always let them self-determine their own lives. Give them autonomy, give them agency, give them the opportunity to have control over their lives. Because when you have a disability, especially a significant disability, people are always doing things for you or to you or telling you to go certain places, and it just takes away a lot of your agency. So that's the advice, is cultivate self-determination at every juncture by giving people meaningful choices about their lives.
Mhm. I read an article recently about how many wheelchairs were damaged by airline industries in their loading and unloading a cargo, and it was like a ridiculously high statistic. And I know part of it's because whoever dismantles it in one place isn't the same person to bring it back together, obviously, on the other side. Uh, but I'm assuming it's even more of a concern with these specialized chairs like this one. So what percentage of flights do you think end up damaging your equipment? And what needs to change in the travel to make things more accommodating?
You got some thoughts on that, don't you, Samuel?
I decided to start the pro.
Sorry, miss it. Try again. This device needs to be tightened a little bit.
I saw a video that said that 35 wheelchairs and scooters are damaged every day by airlines in the US. I think that wheelchairs should be able to drive right onto planes, just like they can on most trains and buses. We want to use this film to advocate for wheelchair access on airplanes and safer handling of wheelchairs.
Yeah, there's some movement happening right now with some airlines. I know Delta's been a little bit out front on this, of redesigning airplanes so that wheelchairs can go right on, at least a limited number of seats. But from what I hear right now, they're talking about charging first class rates for people who want to bring their wheelchairs on, which I don't think is going to hold up in court. That seems really awful. So there's progress happening. We hear Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, has made this a big priority. But we expect to do a lot of policy work with this film, as Samuel said, and that's one of the areas that we're going to focus on.
I did see the Delta chair design yesterday. Basically, it could be a chair that's just there, or it's one that can fold up and leave the space. But it also seemed very limiting on the types of chairs that could then fit there. Obviously, an ideal situation would be every chair has that capability in space, but we all know the airline companies want to maximize every seat for money. So it's a really frustrating battle that I hope can just be changed legally faster than or through courts if no legislation ever happens.
I mean, nothing happens without advocacy, without
Yeah.
people organizing for change. So we just want to be part of that effort. Is that Samuel? You have something to say about this? A big plane? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're getting at? So every time we travel, we have to research how big the plane is that we might be flying on. And we have found that unless it's got at least 3 seats on either side, it's not big enough to put this chair underneath. And as you saw in the film, there's a scene where they turn the chair on its side to get it into the plane and damages it. So we thought it was important to show that. And a lot of wheelchair users who have seen the film to thank you for putting that in the film, like how easily people can just damage chairs and not give a second thought about it. The huge impact on people's lives afterwards.
Yeah. Because this is still a documentary in media, there is so much media out there. How do you feel about how media portrays people with disabilities from your point of view?
People with disabilities should have their voices heard and we should be able to tell our stories. I don't like that movies and stories about people with disabilities are often about curing or saving or even killing the person because they have a disability. Or you will see someone with a disability have an awesome talent at something and people will be inspired and respond to the talent in a way they might not to someone that doesn't have a disability.
And as I said earlier, the whole notion of hiring a majority disabled crew was one of the ways that we felt we could address that by making sure that people both in front of the camera, right, an all disabled cast, but behind the camera is also disabled. Because yeah, I mean, even in some of the major film festivals right now, I've been hearing chatter on a really great group we are part of called Filmmakers with Disabilities Forward Doc. And like Tribeca, someone wrote recently, there's 2 disability themed films in that festival, and both are created by all non-disabled crew. There's not disabled voices behind those productions, and that's a problem.
Mm. I want to thank you again for spending your time answering these questions about co-directing the documentary, and of course your life in general. The Ride Ahead played 2 times already earlier in SIFF this week, so if you missed it, you missed it. But the good news is it is playing in the SIFF streaming platform from Monday, May 20th to Monday, May 27th, a whole 8 days there to get it thin, if you have that ability. So thank you both again so much for the interview and telling your story.
It was great to be with you today. Thanks so much for your questions and reactions.
Yeah,
We'll keep you posted on the ride ahead.
We will keep you posted on the ride ahead, and we just appreciate you very much. And before long, the film will also be in wide release all over the country, but that may be a while, so definitely catch it on the SIFF streaming platform if you can.